A Karen accused me of faking my rare medical condition and dumped my medicine in the trash, thinking that it was candy, causing me to pass out in class. But karma caught up to her when the school took action. Here's what happened. I'm a 15-year-old black male living in America, and I suffer from a rare condition called dysautonomia. It's a disorder of the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary functions like heart rate, blood pressure, and digestion. It's a real pain in the ass, and I gotta deal with dizziness, fainting, and nausea all the time. The docs have me on some medication that helps, but it's not like I'm living the high life, you know? Anyway, I'm sitting in math class, minding my business, when I start feeling that all too familiar sensation of dizziness. My vision starts to blur, and I can tell I'm about to pass out. I've got this little baggie of pills in my backpack that I have to take when this happens. They ain't candy, they're prescription meds, but they do look a little like Skittles. Now let me tell you about my math teacher, Karen. She's the kind of teacher who thinks she knows everything about everyone. She's always in your business and never listens when you try to explain something. So I'm sitting there, trying to get my medicine out without causing a scene. I don't want to be that kid who passes out in the middle of class, but I also don't want to get on Karen's bad side. I'm trying to be low-key, but she's got eyes like a hawk, and she spots me reaching into my bag. "Johnson," she says, all high and mighty, "what are you doing with that baggie?" I'm trying to play it cool, so I just say, "It's my medicine, Karen, I need to take it." She ain't having it, though. She strides over to my desk, hand outstretched, and demands, "Give it to me, now." I don't have much of a choice, so I hand it over. She examines the pills like she's some kind of drug expert and says, "These look like candy. Are you trying to sneak snacks in my classroom?" I'm starting to get a little frustrated at this point, and I can feel the dizziness getting worse. "No, Karen, it's my medicine. I have dysautonomia, and I need to take it when I feel like this." Karen scoffs, not believing me for a second. What? That doesn't sound like a real condition. You're just trying to get out of doing your work." At this point, I'm desperate. "Please, Karen, I'm serious. I need to take my medicine. Can you call the nurse if you don't believe me?" "No," she says, and she starts to walk back to her desk. "I'm not going to let you disrupt my class any further. If you're not going to take your education seriously, maybe you shouldn't be here." I can't believe what I'm hearing. I'm about to pass out, and this woman is accusing me of not taking my education seriously. I try one more time to reason with her. "Karen, please, I don't want to pass out in your class. Just let me take my medicine." She stops in her tracks, turns to face me and says, "Well, maybe you should have thought of that before you brought candy to my class." Then, right in front of the whole class, she opens the baggie and dumps my medicine into the trash can. I can't believe what I'm seeing. My heart is pounding and the dizziness is getting worse by the second. The room starts to spin, and I can tell I'm not going to make it much longer. I stand up and try to steady myself on the desk, but it's no use. My legs give out, and I crumple to the floor. The last thing I hear before everything goes black is Karen's voice, sounding far away and distorted. "Stop faking it, Johnson. This is unacceptable behavior." When I finally come to, I'm lying on the cold tile floor, my face pressed against it. The nurse is kneeling beside me, and I can see the concern in her eyes. She tells me that one of my classmates had run to get her after I'd passed out. She's got another dose of my medicine with her, and she quickly helps me take it. As I'm recovering, the principal comes into the room. He's been filled in on the situation, and he's not happy. He pulls Karen aside and starts talking to her in hushed tones. I can't hear everything they're saying, but I catch bits and pieces. I hear him say, "negligence, dangerous, and unacceptable." When they're done talking, the principal comes over to me and apologizes for what happened. He promises me that it won't happen again, and he tells me that they'll be talking to Karen about her behavior. I can see her standing in the corner of the room, looking all defeated and angry. The nurse takes me down to her office to rest for a bit before I go back to class. As I'm leaving, I see Karen being led away by the principal, her face red with embarrassment. I can't help but feel a little bit of satisfaction, knowing that she's finally getting a taste of her own medicine. In the end, Karen was put on administrative leave while the school conducted an investigation. She ended up having to take some sensitivity training and apologized to me in front of the whole class when she returned. The school also put a system in place for students with medical needs, so that this kind of thing wouldn't happen again. OMG, OP, this story is absolutely infuriating. The audacity of Karen to just dump your medicine in the trash and completely dismiss your condition is beyond belief. I mean, really, Karen? What? Are you kidding me? Honestly, her having to apologize in front of the whole class and take sensitivity training seems like a slap on the wrist. She put your health at risk, and that is just not okay. She should have faced some serious consequences for her actions. But hey, at least the school put a system in place for students with medical needs. A silver lining in this frustrating situation. It's a win for everyone, and hopefully prevents any more Karens from causing harm. Karen accuses me of luring her kid to my car, then is upset I didn't offer him snacks. So it's the first week of school, and my nephew Andy and his friend Falcon are attending the same school again. This, however, is a new school for them. Both my sister-in-law and my neighbor Sissy, Falcon's mother, have me on their emergency contact, and given that I have active role in both the boys' life, I was asked to come in and walk the halls, do the meet and greet, and fill out some information. I've been given this little yellow card for when they get off the bus. As Clarissa and Sissy are both at work, the boys and little Beth will be chilling at my house for after school. I have a card for Beth as well. All things are good and everyone is happy. Later I'm waiting at the bus stop in my 2000 Civic, which is immediately a ricer. I've a kit on it that kinda makes it look like a skyline. I'm driving it a lot right now because I've agreed to give it up to my niece for her 16th and I want more time with my fist car after putting almost 10 years of work into it. Things start when I hear a lady, we'll call her Karen, not because she's a Karen, but because I know that's her name, talking crap about my car. She's over there standing outside her Ford Focus looking like the mean rat she always is. I know Karen well enough. Her son, who I will call Dennis like the menace, was once Falcon's friend, and would be at my house with Andy and Falcon and their other friend Puck. He looks like the character from Gargoyles when I was little. Little boy with long platinum blonde hair and 11 features. He likes the nickname, his parents get the joke, but he is a timid, effeminate little boy. So, a little backstory on why I'm bringing this up. Puck, Dennis, Andy, and Falcon were over my house a lot. Puck would come by all the time to get Otter Pops or fruit snacks or muffins randomly, even when Andy wasn't around. He's a good kid. They would play with him all the time. Then one day, he stopped coming over when Andy and Falcon was over, but would still stop by randomly. So I had noticed Dennis being a brat to Puck, and I had a couple of times stopped Andy and Falcon from being mean or saying mean things to the kid. They never mistreated this kid before Dennis started hanging out with them. Turns out Karen, Dennis' mom, is like hardcore this Westboro Baptist-style Christian, and thinks little Puck is gay and didn't want Dennis hanging around him. She even came to my house and talked to me saying she didn't want Puck there when Dennis was there, which I kindly told her to go Puck herself. You don't dictate what happens in my home. She hit me up with the "you're not even the kid's father" kind of crap. Falcon's dad was still alive at this point, so I asked him to go tell her to go Puck herself. Sissy don't like her no way. Well, I came to find out from Puck's mother that Dennis had told Puck he couldn't play with them at my house anymore, and Dennis had beat up Puck. I went to talk to Dennis about this later when he was at my house, and he said his mom told him it was okay cause Puck was a gay and he was going to hell. These kids are not even 11 yet. So I went to talk to Karen, who was a real cow about it, like terrible, and I ended up saying that Dennis couldn't come back to my house. Also, I talked to Falcon and Andy about what Dennis did, has been saying, and talked to their parents. End result, neither Clarissa or Sissy wanted their kids to be around Dennis. Sissy didn't like Dennis cause of all the trouble he caused in her house. This was just the final straw. So, fast forward. Karen is giving me the stink eye and I'm just ignoring her. The bus comes, Andy and Falcon get off, they come to the car. All the kids are fascinated by my car, and I hardly let the kids ride in it instead of my truck because, well, I worked all summer long back in 2006 to get those fancy seats and stuff. I usually don't even like to have little kids in it, but I'm cruising and we gonna go to Rita's today. Italian Ice. A bunch of the neighborhood kids come up and they're talking and asking about the car. I'm letting them see the inside, though I'm wiping hands and whatever. I got a little thing on the front like Knight Rider. Yes, I'm a nerd, but it's cool. Buses come, we're waiting for Beth's bus, she goes to a different school, and eventually Dennis gets off the bus. He sees Andy and Falcon, he sees the car, he sees me, he comes over. Now I can be an asshole and tell the kid to get lost, but I'm not particularly venomous about the kid. He comes up and his mother comes quickly. He asks me if he can see the car. He's always been into it. I look at Andy and Falcon, who are like not sure what to do, and I'm like, sure Dennis, take a mask, wipe your hands. I got a box of masks and gloves and hand wipes and stuff. Half of that stuff was in the car before COVID, but, you know, little kids can't be vaccinated and they got grubby little Cheeto hands. His mom does not like this. I hear her screech. What's going on? What are you telling him? He is actually cool about it. He says, it's okay, Mom. He just asked me to wipe my hands and wear a mask. He's gonna let me sit in the front. She starts in with the, why does he have to wear a mask? The other kids aren't wearing a mask. I tell her the ones who jumped in my car got a mask and had to wipe their hands. She then goes off about COVID and blah blah, but then takes a turn when she says something in her tirade about me luring kids to me with my car, which I had to stop and stare at her ass. Now Andy, my nephew, he's been in the car many times. He knows that if you lift the thing in the back seat, there's a cooler down there, and so he goes for the snacks. He always does, while this crazy lady is yelling at me. After a moment of craziness, and the boys munching on chips, Beth shows up. I'm so happy. I close my doors, lock them, and go get her. I come back. Karen is still at my car waiting to fuss at me. Dennis is waiting to get into the car. I tell him maybe next time because I just want to leave. He asks if he can have a snack. I look at his mom and she goes, "What, you're not even going to offer him a snack? You gave the other kids snacks." Technically, Andy gave Falcon and the little Asian Indian kid, I don't know his name, snacks from my car if he didn't give Dennis one that was intentional. I know Andy, and he's a little stinker in the making, but I'm like, sure, fine. What do you want? We got chips and juice and some mini Snickers. All stuff I can't eat no more on my diet, but I keep my car and my shelves stocked. Gotta use that Costco card for something. Dennis does not want a snack now. He wants to get into the car. I think he thinks it's either or, like he can't do both. His mom snarls and tells him to get a snack. Then Beth asks if we're going to Rita's, and I say yeah, we'll go to Rita's, and she says she hopes they have the birthday cake. Dennis goes, wow, birthday cake. Can I go? And I don't want to say, hey, you mini hate crimed kid sissy and Clarissa don't want you around their kids, and I don't particularly like you, which would be the truth. Instead, I immediately get slick at the mouth and say, I don't think that's a good idea. Wouldn't want to lure you in with my car and the promise of treats, looking directly at his mom, who then lays into me for not offering to take the kid. Not 5 minutes after she said that crap earlier, she then starts talking loud and getting the other parents there involved. But this is my neighborhood, and most of these people know me, Andy and Falcon. And Dennis has been a little problem maker forever, and people are tired of Karen. So, thankfully, the most unlikely person in the world spoke up. The old Asian lady who is so sweet, I didn't think she spoke English, or spoke it well, but she told her to shut up and take her badass kid home, and I heard that clear enough. Folks was laughing, she scowled at me, and I told Dennis he can sit in the front seat before he left if his mom agreed. Of course she didn't, called me an asshole and drug her kid off. After that we went to Rita's and all was good, but I heard the kids talking about Dennis's crazy mom the whole time. I tried to stir the conversation away, talking about the first day of school and all that, but nope, they wanted to talk about Dennis and his crazy mom. Oh my gosh, OP, you've really dealt with one heck of a Karen here. First, she's accusing you of luring kids to your car, and then she gets mad that you didn't offer her son a snack? I mean, make up your mind, Karen. And can we just talk about how amazing that old Asian lady was for standing up to Karen? You go, Grandma. Honestly, it's just a shame that Dennis has to deal with such a toxic environment at home. You're clearly a great influence for Andy, Falcon, and the other kids in your neighborhood. Keep up the good work, and don't let that Karen bring you down. Mother claims cat is possessed and forces me to get rid of it. A couple months ago my mother hired this spirit guild woman to bless our house for I don't know what reason. The woman came up my room, burned some like incense or sage, then had me sit down so she could pray for me and read me. I respect my mother's beliefs, but I was a little skeptical of this stranger touching my face and blowing in my face. She told us that I was going to grow into a smart, successful woman who would marry a rich husband. Then she walked off with my mother to her room to do the same for her. An hour later, after the woman left, my mother sat me down, took my hand, and told me about what spiritual guide told her. Apparently my moods, clinically diagnosed depression, was because I was being haunted and I needed protection from my spirit animal, which conveniently happened to be the animal drawn in most of my art, hung on my walls and in my notebooks. I told my mother that I don't have the time or mental capacity to care for a cat, but my spirit needed to be balanced and protected. My aunt's cat had given birth a while back, so she had 4 cats roaming around, so acquiring a spirit animal wasn't hard. Before the cat even got here, I realized that nobody else was going to take care of it, so I went into my saving and bought everything the cat would need. When I asked my mother where I should set up the cat stuff, she explained how it was implied that the cat would stay in our yard. I asked my mom if she wanted the cat to straight up run away, or get attacked by one of the neighborhood stray, who often broke into our backyard to get into our trash cans, so she suggested that the cat stay in my room. I picked up the cat, and once it was in the house, my younger brother fell in love with her. The cat was named by our mother after our home state Georgia, which was cute, I guess. My mother forced me to lock the cat in my bathroom overnight because she was worried that it would stink up my room, so Georgia, who had gotten attached to me at this point, spent the first night crying in the bathroom for hours. I was told not to go into the bathroom or else she would never get over her separation anxiety. Because I had to listen to her cry all night, I didn't get any sleep, which had a little more irritable the next day. The first week was weird. Eventually I started to get attached to Georgia, who would follow me around the house and sit in my lap while I worked. My brother had also gotten to the point where he would refer to himself as Georgia's dad, and would spend a good amount of his free time with her. The only person who didn't click with the cat was my mother, who didn't want Georgia in her room or her office space. She loved taking pictures of the cat, or having me put her into those cat dresses for show, but my mother would also jump and squeal every time the cat approached her. One morning after having Georgia for like 2 weeks, my mother called me into her office and told me about the dream that she had. Georgia attacked her in this dream, and it had really freaked my mother out. I assured my mother that the cat was very sweet and not violent at all. In fact, Georgia had been very gentle and patient with my 4-year-old cousin when he was manhandling her and grabbing at her. My mother, who has claimed that she has magical powers and can see visions and signs in her dreams, told me that this was proof that there is something going on with the cat. That night my mother came downstairs to the living room, where the maid and I were playing around with Georgia. Being a curious little thing as cats are, after seeing my mother sit down on the couch, Georgia walked over. She stretched out and put her paws on the armrest, and my mother jumped and screamed about how the cat jumped at her just like in her dream. Georgia got scared and ran off to go hide behind me. I tried to explain to my mom that the cat had not jumped at her, but she didn't care. She ordered me to pick up my cat and lock her up in my room where she couldn't jump at her. The next night after that, my mother was down in the living room again, and the cat happened to be laying on the floor. At one point, Georgia had woken up from her nap and turned to look at my mother. My mom pointed out the way Georgia was looking at her, saying she was glaring. I told her she's just looking normally when she started to lecture me about demons and possession and stuff, but I kinda tuned her out because I was busy working on an essay. That night, my mother dragged me back into her office and started to tell me about her theory. Apparently, my mom has enemies who did witchcraft to ruin her marriage, and they have now processed the cat to watch us through Georgia's eyes. I don't even remember how most of the conversation went after that, because I was just in a different headspace after that sentence. After that discussion, Georgia was banned from being in my mother's vicinity, or really anywhere but my room, which really upset Georgia because I had to leave my room for stuff, and she would be all alone. And when I left her alone, she would start crying for me to come back, which my mother could hear from her office. My mother started threatening to get rid of the cat, but at this point I had gotten into a schedule and gotten attached to Georgia. Christmas was just around the corner at the time, so my brother was excited to celebrate Georgia's first Christmas. My mother was a little more lenient that day when we were putting up decorations, so she let the cat out to walk around the living room. At one point my mom took out the light green ring things for the door, and Georgia got really stiff looking at it. As soon as my mother noticed that she was afraid, she chased the poor baby around the room with it, cackling like a Disney villain. Eventually, Georgia ran up back to my room where she hid under my bed until my mother allowed me to go upstairs to comfort the cat. When I came back, my mother informed me that she wanted me to put the cat and her stuff in the yard. She felt that her enemies were starting to gather information on me in my room to hurt her, so the cat needed to be taken out. I didn't want to argue with my mom, so the next day, I bought one of those doghouse cage things and started setting up the yard. I was coming back into the house when my mother came down the stairs and saw me with some of the stuff for the cat and asked what I'm doing. In a normal tone, I just let her know I'm getting ready to set the cat outside, and she went ballistic saying I was giving her attitude. Before I could even respond, she just started yelling at me, and I stood there for a minute until she finished before asking her, "You wanted me to put the cat in the yard, so I was taking the steps to do so. You asked me what I was doing, and I explained to you that I was complying with what you wanted and putting the cat outside. Now you're telling me that I have an attitude, and I just want to know, what did I do wrong?" She glared at me for a solid 20 seconds before looking me over and completely changing the topic, telling me what I was wearing wasn't right. I never thought I would get shamed for wearing pajamas in my own home. It's important to note that she was also in her pajamas. I was just too tired to argue at this blatant gaslight and just nodded my head before going upstairs, showering and changing clothes. After I had everything set up, my mother ordered me to move all of the cat stuff to my balcony because she didn't want my cat to be able to see her through her office window, which was facing the yard. Just when that was done, she just told me that it was over and that she's getting rid of the cat. She intended to send Georgia away somewhere instead of giving her back to my aunt because she was afraid that her enemies would start spying on my aunt to get to her. I was upset and my brother was crushed, so we tried to argue a bit for the cat, and she said that if we could keep her on the balcony and out of her space, then we could keep Georgia. I complied with everything that she wanted, did whatever she asked of me. 3 days later, out of nowhere, after telling us 2 days earlier that we could keep our cat, she came into my room and told me to pack her up. I asked her what she meant, and she just starts smiling and giggling in my face as she told me that she had given away my cat. After getting Georgia in her carrier, I got into the car with her before we went off to some random neighborhood. Once we got to this building, a man came up and he had me take Georgia out of her carrier before taking her away from me. I'll never forget the look in her eyes as the man started to walk away. She looked so confused and hurt. I cried all the way home, then went straight into my room, shut my door and stayed in there until my brother came home because I wanted to be the one to tell him, knowing how my mother would be. He did not take it too well, obviously, but my mother's reaction was worse. She walked by his room and saw him crying and laughed at him. The next day my mother came into my room while I was in one of my classes doing whatever work I was doing. She gave me this sickly sweet smile, then walked up to me and gave me a hug, which is weird because she doesn't initiate affection unless it's to emphasize a point or manipulate me. I didn't hug her back or really say anything until she walked back over to my door and said, "Don't be mad at me. Are you mad at me?" I told her I don't know. Then she started telling me not to be depressed, and that it was just a stupid cat, and that we'll get a dog to replace her. When that didn't make me smile and go back worshiping her, she went super cold. I didn't really want to be in my house anymore, so I asked her if I could spend the night at my best friend's that weekend. She then went on a purity rant and told me that if I kept acting depressed, I couldn't keep hanging out with my best friend because she makes me depressed. I told my mother that I wasn't depressed because I have my friends, and then I was depressed because she gave away my cat. She then told me to get over it because it had already been 2 days. Then she told me to shut the hell up when I told her it hadn't even been 24 hours yet and grounded me. Her birthday came around after that, so she couldn't be bothered with this subject. Georgia hasn't come up since then. She just pretends like it never happened, as she usually does whenever she destroys something that I love. All that I know is that Georgia is living with some Italian family on the other side of our city, supposedly happier now. Oh my goodness, OP, I can't believe the absolute roller coaster you had to go through with your mom and poor Georgia. The way your mom got that spiritual guide, and then the whole spirit animal thing. I mean, come on. But let's talk about your mom being scared of Georgia and accusing her of being possessed. Like seriously? A cute, innocent kitty? Possessed? Nah, I don't buy it. And I can't even with how she forced you to move Georgia around and then just gave her away without any warning. Ugh, but the real cherry on top was when she laughed at your brother crying. That's just cruel. You and your brother are champs for handling this situation, but man, that's a tough pill to swallow. I'm sending you virtual hugs and hoping you'll be able to heal from this. As a 20-year-old male college student, I was excited to take my 18-year-old deaf sister out shopping with me. We've always had a special bond, and I love spending time with her. However, what we didn't expect was for our day to be interrupted by Karen, who had some serious misconceptions about sign language. My sister and I often use sign language to communicate, but we also have some verbal ability. We were in a crowded shopping center with a lot of noise and distractions, but we managed to navigate fairly well. Suddenly, my sister was having trouble understanding me, and I used some signs that must have looked unusual to an outsider. I pointed at my eyes and then at my sister's hands to indicate I needed to see her signs better. That's when Karen approached us. She was a middle-aged white woman with a short haircut and an aggressive demeanor. She demanded to know what we were doing with our hands, and I tried to explain that my sister was deaf and we were communicating. However, Karen was not having it. "I don't care what you're doing, those are gang signs and you need to stop," she yelled. "I'm calling the police right now." I tried to reason with her. "Ma'am, please understand that my sister is deaf and we are just trying to communicate. We are not doing anything wrong." But Karen wasn't listening. "You're just making excuses," she said. "I know gang signs when I see them." As Karen continued to berate us, I could feel the tension building. My sister and I just wanted to finish our shopping and go home, but Karen wouldn't let up. People passing by were starting to stare, and I felt like I was being judged. As we tried to ignore Karen and go about our shopping, she kept following us and making comments about our supposed criminal activity. "Hey, what are you two up to?" she shouted. "Are you throwing up gang signs or something? I've seen this kind of thing before." I could feel my blood boiling, but I knew I had to stay calm for my sister's sake. "No, we're just talking to each other," I explained. "My sister is deaf, so we use sign language. There's no need to be worried." Karen scoffed and crossed her arms. "I don't buy it," she said. "You kids are up to something, I just know it. I'm calling the police." My sister and I exchanged a worried glance. We didn't want any trouble, but we also didn't want to stop communicating with each other. As we stood there, Karen made good on her threat and called 911, claiming that she had witnessed a gang-related disturbance and needed immediate assistance. My sister and I were terrified and confused, but we tried to cooperate with the police officers who arrived on the scene. As we waited for them to arrive, Karen continued to make a scene, shouting about how we were criminals and needed to be stopped. Finally, the police officers arrived on the scene, and we felt relieved that help had finally arrived. "What seems to be the problem here?" one of the officers asked. Karen immediately started shouting, pointing at us and insisting that we were part of a gang. "These kids are dangerous," she said. "They're throwing up gang signs and plotting something." The officers approached us and asked what was going on. My sister and I explained that my sister was deaf and we were using sign language to communicate. "We're not doing anything wrong," I said. "We're just talking to each other." The officers asked us to demonstrate some basic signs, which we did. "See?" I said. "It's just sign language. There's no need to be worried." I could see from their facial expressions that the officers were starting to understand the situation. They looked over at Karen and started talking to her, but I couldn't hear what they were saying because they were a distance away. Karen was still insisting that we were up to no good, but the officers seemed to be ignoring her and focusing on us. One of the officers gestured for us to follow him, and we walked away from Karen and the crowd of people who had gathered. Once we were a safe distance away, the officers asked us more about our communication needs and how we navigated the world as a deaf person. "It must be tough," one of the officers said. "I can't imagine how hard it would be to communicate with people who don't understand sign language." I could see from their expressions that they were genuinely interested and compassionate, which made me feel grateful. After a few more minutes of conversation, the officers radioed for a car to come pick up Karen and take her away. As she was being escorted out of the shopping center, she continued to shout and make a scene. As Karen was being escorted out, she continued to shout, "I know what I saw! These kids are up to no good!" I couldn't believe how stubborn she was being, but I was just grateful that the police officers were able to defuse the situation without any violence. One of the officers turned to my sister and asked for her name, before realizing his mistake and signing sorry to her. I couldn't help but laugh a little. Despite the tense situation, the officer's genuine mistake broke the tension and made us all feel a little bit better. "Hey OP, I just wanted to say that I support you and your sister. Karen was way out of line and it's ridiculous that she thought sign language was gang signs. It's frustrating when people jump to conclusions and make assumptions without trying to understand. But I'm glad the police officers were able to handle the situation and help you out. Honestly, the story does sound a bit far-fetched to me, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if something like this actually happened. Either way, it's a good reminder to be more understanding and not jump to conclusions. Has anyone else had a similar experience or witnessed something like this before?" My mother-in-law tried to stop my wife's life-saving treatments. Allow me to introduce you to my late mother-in-law. I'll call her Carol, for the sake of variety. Though I've heard many stories about her, for the most part I'll stick with things that I witnessed myself. There are enough of them. I don't think Carol ever met a New Age concept that she didn't like. Her expressed goal was to synthesize all religion, science, and mysticism into a unified whole. Asterisk. All of it. To this end, she amassed a large collection of books and stranger objects from her travels, with an especial focus on healing. Her library had volumes about vibration manipulation, curative trampolining, homeopathic color therapy, and on and on. I am not joking or exaggerating here. Her shelves had lots of admittedly pretty mineral crystals, along with bottles of magic goddess essence water, evaporated away, and bogus radon protectors powered by diagrams of geometric figures. Her favorite book, based on the number of annotations and sticky notes, was hundreds of pages of word salad about spiritual beings from the star Arcturus. That's Arcturus, spelled with an H, because of h-bar, Planck's constant from physics, except that Planck's constant is denoted by H and h-bar is the reduced Planck's constant. It's important to get the details right when you're dealing with spiritual beings. Her pentagonal home was custom-built around an energy vortex that she discovered in the coastal peaks of British Columbia. Carol's parenting was, how shall I put this, more darkly eccentric. She was physically and emotionally abusive to her children. One still has some pencil lead embedded in his hand from when she stabbed him because she wasn't satisfied with his piano practice. She attacked one with a kitchen knife. She started slut-shaming her daughter, later my wife, as soon as she grew breasts, for growing breasts. So she forced her daughter to wear 2 large bathing suits, with the apparent intention of making said breasts look smaller by contrast, but with the actual effect that there were wardrobe malfunctions. She was ashamed that her daughter went into medicine and became a noted specialist, rather than supporting her own non-traditional medical work. My wife got the hell out at age 17 and moved across the country to go to university. For most of the time after that, she went relatively low contact. A decade ago, my wife suffered from a surgical error which resulted in abdominal sepsis and asked me to call her mother. That made me understand just how deathly serious the situation was. I was to call in the family for what might be the last time. I hadn't grasped that her life was truly at risk until that point. Nothing less would have induced her to try to get her mother to visit. To her credit, Carol hurried out for what was supposed to be a couple of weeks. It was expected that in that time, my wife would be either dead or on the road to recovery. Carol stayed in our home, and at first things didn't go too badly. For the most part, we just didn't talk about the treatments that my wife was undergoing. Carol did express concern about the antibiotics that were being given, since according to her own views, antibiotics did nothing but harm. But a couple of weeks stretched into a couple of months, and Carol became harder to live with. She was angry when I stroked my wife's hair with my hand because I was blocking the energy from her chakra. She started blaming me for having somehow caused the nausea that the botched surgery was supposed to cure. I drove her out to pick up a magical concoction of essential oils, on the condition that she check with one of the doctors before applying them. I pointed out that if the mixture had the power to heal, then it also had the power to cause harm, which Carol denied. When we got back to the hospital, I nabbed one of the residents when we reached my wife's floor to ask about that. Carol became furious about that, and it was clear that she had had no intention of talking with the doctors. At home, she became more abusive to me. She was claiming that I was abusing my wife by not letting her have her things in the house. At that point, I lost my temper, the first time I'd yelled at a person in literally a couple of decades. I told her that almost everything in sight was actually her daughter's, displacing my stuff. The sofas, the piano, tables and chairs, the bookshelves, and the electronics. The shelves for the CDs and DVDs were mine, but half the contents were hers. Carol wanted to know if I'd be continuing the herbal remedies after she left, and I told her that that was up to my wife. I'd continue them if she wanted. I'd stop them if she preferred. Carol screamed that I was abusing my wife by following her own wishes rather than her mother's. On the night before Carol was finally supposed to be heading out, I was restless. That particular nightmare was about to end, but my wife was still quite ill. I got to thinking about that essential oil mixture, which included both oil of cloves and oil of cinnamon. Those are both strongly irritating if left on the skin, and Carol had been painting my wife's feet with the stuff. Her feet were apparently the correct energy points to draw out the infection. I went online and found the manufacturer's instructions, which specified that the oil needed to be significantly diluted with some neutral oil if it was going to be applied to the skin. Carol hadn't even been using the stuff properly. Well, that explained why the skin on my wife's feet was yellow and starting to peel . But Carol was furious when I calmly pointed out the problems that she was creating, out of ignorance. A few days after Carol left, my wife took a turn for the worse and had to go back into the intensive care unit. And I dreaded the phone call that I had to make, not because of the bad news, but because I anticipated how Carol would react. And she didn't disappoint. If you really loved her, you'd put her back onto the herbal oil and stop the antibiotics. You know perfectly well they don't do a damn lick of good. At which point, I hung up. I had other things to worry about. My wife pulled through, after months in hospital and 3 stays in ICU. She's still in poor health. I told her that I was putting my foot down. Under no circumstances was her mother welcome under my roof again. She had grossly abused her privileges as a house guest. I didn't care about the family custom that family members were always welcome to stay as guests. I would not stay under the same roof as her mother. Having heard my stories, and based on her own experiences, my wife agreed. A few years ago, Carol died, much as she had lived. She was diagnosed with metastasized lung cancer. Although she did undergo some real medical therapies, she relied mostly on her quack remedies: pawpaw twig powder, whey protein, immune boosters, and the like. The usual crap that ethics-free swindlers pawn off on desperate sufferers. She firmly believed that all the little white spots on her lung x-rays were a good sign, and that her rapid weight loss indicated that her boosters were draining the cancer away. If there's some existence after death, I hope she came to appreciate all of the harm that she did in life. Except, a couple of nights after she passed away, I was driving from the hospital back to the Energy Vortex house. The rental car's navigation device suggested a shorter route than I'd taken to get there, but that route turned into a back road, into a rough road in the hills, into a track through the forest, and in pitch darkness apart from my headlights, over a rocky bump and directly into a tree trunk . Luckily, I was traveling slowly and stopped in time. As I paused, shaken, I got to wondering if there might be something to Carol's worldview after all, and if her vengeful spirit might have possessed the GPS device, making one last try at killing me. You're a lucky man to have survived such an ordeal. I hope you and your wife will be able to get past this traumatic experience and that your wife can recover from her injuries. Won a lawsuit against a guy who tried to force me out of business because I broke his local monopoly. I am 26 years old, and I decided to open my own business this year. Moving forward in this post, I should point out that I am from a small town, 1,000 people, in the rural Midwest. Because of this, everyone has some sort of connection with someone. We went to one of the liquor stores in the closest city 30-ish minutes away. Small city, 8,000 people. When we were grabbing some alcohol for a party, I was looking at the prices and saw how insane the prices were. For a 6-pack of a local beer, we were charged $15. I was thinking about this and figured that I could probably make bank opening a liquor store. Back in February, I was furious about my shitty job and thinking out loud how cool it would be to own my own business to a friend. My friend's mom happened to be the president of the local bank. He told me, "Hey, with the pandemic, the bank has been struggling to find customers to give out loans. Right now, the bank is giving loans for cheap." A couple of weeks later, I went in and met with my friend's mom and pitched my idea with the research I had done on alcohol prices, potential demand, and estimated income. I got the loan at a fantastic interest rate. I bought a building, which happened to be the former bank, and hired my dad to help me renovate the building. My dad is a general contractor, and he gave me an excellent quote on materials and labor. After working everything out with the distributors, getting the proper licenses, and getting my paperwork I needed for the government, I was ready to open my liquor store in May. I had started taking out ads in the local newspaper advertising my store and my prices. When I was in talks with my distributors, I learned, even with inflation and everything else, the liquor stores in the city had like an 80% markup. I talked to a local business owner, and he suggested that I have around a 35% to 40% markup. Because of this, I was significantly cheaper than the closest liquor store and had a much wider selection than the gas stations and small local stores nearby. My hometown is near a national forest. As such, we have a ton of people who come up for weekends for recreational activates year-round. My first week, the week before Memorial Weekend, after opening, I had made a $4,000 profit. It was great being my own boss. If someone was rude to me or my girlfriend, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can do your business elsewhere." If someone tells my GF, "Go back to China, you chink bitch," they can pay me 15% more at the register. Did the gang and I run out of alcohol? Time to grab my keys. Not car keys, the store keys. My apartment is like 2 blocks away. And go to the store. That's not to say that it wasn't difficult running my own business, especially that my only employee was my GF, and we were both working 6 or 7 10 to 12-hour days a week. I was both manager, accountant, and cashier. But fuck, it's so much nicer knowing I can tell someone to pound sand for being a prick. Couple of weeks after Memorial Day, some old guy walks into my store a couple of minutes after I opened. He seemed friendly enough, but eventually he offered to buy my store. I'm not going to say the amount, but it wouldn't have even covered my principal on the loan. I rejected the proposal outright and refused to negotiate the sum higher. He walked out of my store saying, "Welp, you'll be sorry you rejected that offer." The next month, a guy walked into my store and asked if I was the owner. After saying yes, I was informed that my business was being sued by this random guy I never heard of for libel. After he left, I was freaking out and I decided that I was going to close early. When I got home, I Googled the guy and soon saw a picture of the guy that tried to buy my store. It turns out that that is the guy who owns both of the liquor stores in the nearby city. It also just so happens that he is on city council. With a little bit of further digging, I learned that this city has an ordinance that reads, "Any business institution that does not fulfill the definition of a restaurant, tavern, or liquor dispensary will be excluded from obtaining a license for the sale of alcohol." Later I discovered that the same guy happens to be the head of the board which approves liquor licenses. I love small-town corruption. Either way, I had a major issue. My maternal uncle happens to be a lawyer in a neighboring state. I decided to call him and try to get some legal advice. I talked to him and read the documents that I had been handed/served over the phone and the research I had done. After receiving all of the information I had read off, I was expecting to get some sort of advice but instead heard, "Hang on, I gotta make a call," and he hung up. I'm freaking out. I was actually about to post my first post to our legal advice. I'll be honest, I just wanted someone to tell me it was going to be okay, and I didn't need to crawl to this guy on my hands and knees. As I was writing the title, my uncle called back, "Hey OP, I just got off the phone with my partner. He agreed that we can take your case pro bono. If you would like to accept, we can discuss at my office tomorrow at 1 o'clock. This is how I learned that my uncle is on the bar in 3 states. So we meet, and we discuss the case. It turns out that the guy filed the libel suit against my business based on the ads I took out in the local newspapers. He claimed that my ads were targeted to damage his and his business's reputation. There were a few other things that I had no idea what was being referenced, but Uncle assured me that we would win this case no problem. 3 weeks later, the case is dismissed, but after my uncle says, "People like that piece of work will likely try to file another suit against you. If that happens, call me and promise I will help." The next day I get served again, but this time I am the defendant. Not my store, me. I swear to God I look at the documentation and the only thing that changed was instead of my business's name, mine is listed as the defendant. Same thing happens. 4 weeks later the case is dismissed. Over the next 3 months I was sued just as many times. Before the 5th case's hearing we had a settlement meeting. My uncle, the judge, the guy suing me, his lawyer, a bailiff and I were sitting in this room. Judge says, "You two have been in court 4 times already. Is there any way we could come to an agreement that'll stop this cycle of faulty litigation?" The guy's lawyer says they have an offer, and hand it to my uncle, who then hands it to me. It essentially read that he'll stop all litigation if I sell my business for about 30% of remaining loan principal. I outright rejected the offer and made a counteroffer. I said, "If you drop this case, I won't sue your ass for harassment." He busts out laughing. "Sue me? With what money? The legal fees alone ought to have drained you. You should be happy I chose to extend this offer and not sue your ass into bankruptcy and buy that shithole from the bank when the foreclose on your dumb ass." The judge, the bailiff, and the guy's own lawyer were all looking at him aghast for saying the silent part out loud about the real reason I was getting sued. My uncle straight out said to him, "Oh, I am sorry. Apparently you were never told. I have taken all of my nephew's cases pro bono. The only money he has spent on your litigations is gas. And bluntly, sir, I think your outburst has just ensured a suit against you." After that, we just left, and I was then informed a few days later the litigation was dropped. Right now, my uncle and I are talking about the future suit against the guy. I want to sue the guy for a very high amount to try and get press attention on this guy and his sketchy actions. Although my uncle warned me that we'll need to be careful because if we set the damages too high, it'll look like we're just being vindictive. This suit won't be pro bono, but after getting sued 5 times for free essentially, I am not going to complain. Looking back on this, I am so thankful that my friends and family supported the entire way, especially my uncle. Without my uncle, I would have absolutely lost my business. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. I can't even imagine. It must have been so awful, especially for you and your girlfriend. I'm glad she's doing better now. I don't know if you're interested in pursuing any legal action against this person, but it seems like a good idea to me, at least if she has insurance, which is likely. If nothing else, the stress of dealing with this and the other issues that are probably affecting your life right now could be lessened by taking action against this person, who deserves it and clearly has no sense of empathy or remorse.
Karen accused me of spying on her with my hearing aid, despite me providing proof that it was just a medical device. She refused to take responsibility and demanded I be removed from the store. Here's what happened. It was just a typical Friday evening, and I decided to head to the grocery store to pick up some essentials. I was feeling a bit tired from a long week of work, but I was determined to get everything I needed and head home for a relaxing weekend. As I was walking through the aisles, I heard someone calling out to me from behind. I turned around to see a middle-aged woman with a cart standing there with a scowl on her face. "Excuse me, but you just bumped into my cart," she said in a tone that suggested she was accusing me of something. "Oh, I'm sorry about that," I replied, trying to be polite. "I didn't see your cart there." "Well, you should have been paying attention," she retorted. I tried to explain that it was an accident and that I apologized, but she wouldn't let it go. She kept insisting that I was being careless and that I needed to be more aware of my surroundings. I apologized again and tried to walk away, but she blocked my path with her cart. At this point, I was starting to get frustrated. I didn't think I had done anything wrong and I didn't appreciate her attitude, but I decided to just brush it off and move on. I turned around and started to walk away, but she wasn't done yet. "Excuse me, sir," she called out to a store manager who was passing by, "but this person bumped into my cart and then refused to take responsibility for it." The store manager, a middle-aged man, came over to try and mediate the situation. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked. "This person bumped into my cart and then refused to take responsibility for it," the woman, who I now knew as Karen, repeated. I tried to explain my side of the story, but Karen interrupted me. "And what's that thing in his ear? It looks like some kind of recording device," she said, pointing to my ear. The store manager looked at me, confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but what is she talking about?" It was at this point that the realization hit me. Karen was referring to my hearing aid. "That's my hearing aid," I said, feeling a mix of embarrassment and anger. The store manager looked at me skeptically. "Are you sure it's not some kind of recording device? She seems pretty convinced that it is." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I assure you, it's just a hearing aid. I've had it for years and it helps me hear better," I said, trying to keep my cool. Karen, however, was insistent. "I know what I saw. It looks like some kind of recording device and I want it removed," she said, her voice rising. The store manager looked back and forth between Karen and me, unsure of what to do. I could tell he was starting to side with her, and I knew I had to do something to prove my innocence. I pulled out my hearing aid manual and my medical ID card, both of which clearly state that it was a hearing aid. The store manager looked at the evidence, his expression changing to one of embarrassment. "I apologize, sir. I can see now that it is indeed a hearing aid," he said, turning to Karen. "I'm sorry, but there's been a misunderstanding here. This is just a hearing aid and there's no recording device." But Karen was not satisfied. "I still don't trust it. I want it removed," she said, crossing her arms. I couldn't believe the audacity of this woman. I had provided proof that it was just a hearing aid, but she still refused to believe it. I decided that enough was enough, and that I didn't need to put up with this kind of behavior. "Ma'am, I assure you that this is just a hearing aid. It's not a recording device, and it's not harmful in any way," I said, trying to reason with her. But Karen was not swayed. "I saw something on Fox News about these devices emitting radiation and being potentially harmful. I don't trust it, and I want it removed," she said, her voice growing louder. The store manager's expression changed to one of concern. "Ma'am, I assure you that there's no scientific evidence to support these claims. This is just a hearing aid, and it's not harmful in any way," he said, trying to calm her down. "I want it removed, and I want to speak to your manager," she said, her voice rising. The store manager looked at her, his expression one of annoyance. "I literally am the manager, that's why I'm here," he said, his tone sarcastic. Karen's expression changed to one of disbelief. "You're the manager? Well, then I demand that this man's hearing aid be removed," she said, pointing to me. The store manager rolled his eyes. "Ma'am, I've already told you that this is just a hearing aid. It's not a recording device, and it's not harmful in any way. I suggest you leave and continue your shopping elsewhere," he said, his tone firm. Karen's expression turned to one of anger. "I will not be spoken to in this manner. I demand to speak to your superior," she said, her voice rising. The store manager's expression changed to one of frustration. "I am the highest authority here, and I'm telling you to leave," he said, his tone forceful. Karen, however, was not backing down. She got up in the manager's face and started to shout, "I demand justice. I demand this man's weird device be removed." The store manager's patience was wearing thin. "Ma'am, I've already told you that this is just a hearing aid. It's not a harmful radiation device, and I suggest you leave and continue your shopping elsewhere," he said, his tone firm. But Karen was not satisfied. "I'll be telling the local press about this. This store is endorsing harmful radiation devices, and I won't stand for it," she said, her voice rising. The store manager's expression changed to one of frustration. "Ma'am, I'm not going to repeat myself. This is just a hearing aid, and it's not harmful in any way. I suggest you leave before I call security," he said, his tone forceful. But Karen was not backing down. She continued to shout and cause a scene. The manager quickly called security, and Karen was escorted out of the store. As I watched her being led away, I couldn't believe the audacity of this woman. She had caused a scene, accused me of spying on her, wasted the store manager's time, and had the audacity to threaten to contact the press. It was clear that she was just another entitled Karen who thought the world revolved around her. I couldn't help but feel angry and frustrated as I continued with my shopping, the memory of the encounter still fresh in my mind. As I walked through the aisles, I couldn't shake off the feeling of embarrassment and injustice. I couldn't believe that I had been singled out and accused of something so ridiculous, simply because of my hearing aid. I do think there's a silver lining to the story. Sounds like the manager was very understanding and supportive of you and your hearing aid. It also sounds like he stood up for you and made sure that this Karen woman left the store without causing any more trouble. He could have just as easily ignored her accusations or backed them up instead of standing by you. And even though she was able to cause a scene in the store and embarrass you, it's clear she didn't get what she wanted because she was ultimately escorted out of the store by security. So, yeah, this experience was obviously very hurtful and frustrating for you. But it sounds like in the end, justice prevailed. You did nothing wrong. But in spite of that, the truth came out on top. A Karen and her family arrive at a hotel expecting preferential treatment. But when they don't get it, they start to act entitled and cause a ruckus. Here's what happened when security got involved. So I worked the graveyard shift as a security guard for a small private company, and one of the places I've worked security for was at 2 hotels. One thing I do while I'm at work is to try to be respectful and give someone the benefit of the doubt, especially when there's supposedly only one witness to something going on. I also try and be as respectful as I can be, even when the person or people I'm dealing with are being uncooperative and belligerent. One of the things I do when I first get on shift is to talk to the front desk of the first hotel I would guard and see if they need anything before I begin my patrols for the night. And I always checked in with the front desk as often as I could so they knew I was there to help if needed. I would then walk over to the second hotel and do the same thing. Most of the time, they would ask me to go to a room and knock to let the guests know they were being a little too loud and that there was a noise complaint. And the guests would usually apologize, then quiet down for the night. This night in question, I had to deal with 3 entitled parents. One thing about the hotel is that the lobby closes to the public at 9 p.m., so that means any large gatherings are prohibited from continuing at that time. And that is the time I would start work. I grabbed a radio so the hotels could contact me at any moment they needed security. I would walk from the first hotel after having let them know that I was on duty, and I would make my way over to the second hotel and do the same thing. When I checked in with the front desk of the second hotel, the clerk behind the desk asked if I could talk to a group of adults who had been drinking and were getting very loud. I calmly and respectfully told them that they could continue their party in their rooms, but they had to vacate the lobby as it was officially closed for the night. The clerk at the front desk had told me that she had tried to get them to quiet down and leave the lobby for the past 10 minutes, yet they complained that as guests they were entitled to stay in the lobby. They complained that the hotel had gotten security involved, and complained on their way back to the rooms, but left the lobby. I began my patrols when I got a call less than 30 minutes later at the same hotel because someone had complained that children were running in the halls. The hotel was currently hosting a sports event, and many kids on the sports team were there. The clerk behind the front desk had me meet her in the lobby, and we went to the room we believed the children were. When I saw the kids, they said that they had all been outside until a moment ago, when they came back to the room, which I could verify is true. The kids then said that they had seen two kids that appeared to be twins running through the hallways. The clerk leaned her back and gave an exhausted sigh and told me that she had gotten all day about these two kids, and she believed that the parents were in the group that had been kicked out of the lobby earlier. I walked around the hotel to see if I could find the room the kids were in and was stopped by hotel maintenance and told that they had seen those kids running away from the floor I was on, and that the fire retardant cases were all open, and one appeared to have been kicked in and was badly dented. I spotted the two kids in question, and they immediately went back to their room at a running pace when they spotted me. I found out what room they were in and reported everything to the clerk before going to the first and second floor to find out if any more damage had happened, and a guest had told me that they saw two twins running around the second floor, and I found all the cases open, except one that had been broken. It was missing the handle and the glass was cracked. I went to the lobby and showed the pictures of all the damage done, and the clerk called her manager directly at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night. For those who don't know, most hotel management is never in on the weekends. The manager had said that these kids and their parents needed to leave immediately and charge the room for all damages done to the hotel. I waited until 10:30 p.m. to go to the room, hoping that parents would be back in the room. I went up to the room and knocked on the door, and one of the kids responded. The encounter went as followed. OP: Hello, I am security for the hotel. Are your parents in the room? Entitled kid: No. OP: Can you tell me where your parents are? Entitled kid: In another room. OP: Can you tell me what room they're in? The entitled kid told me what room the parents are in, and I immediately told the children to contact their parents and have them meet me up at the room. As soon as the door closed, I stepped away from the door, but kept it in the immediate view, and contacted the front desk and asked the clerk to wait with me since we were dealing with minors, and for safety reasons for all parties involved, and didn't want to deal with the "he was harassing us for no reason and stalking us all night" crap. The parents took 15 minutes to come to the room, as they expected me to leave the floor the children were on, and I was afraid they would run to another room and break more stuff on the way. The first thing that happened was the entitled father started yelling at me. Entitled father: What are you doing creeping outside of our children's room? OP: Hello, I'm a security officer with the hotel. I was asked to speak with you as your children have been accused of breaking hotel property. Friend of entitled parents: So you thought you would harass young boys? Do you get off on doing that or something? OP: Sir, your children have been accused of breaking hotel property, and because of the risk of them supposedly doing this again, my job here is that I am assigned to protect this hotel from such things, and as such, your children are considered a threat to the safety of the hotel. Entitled father: You've no right to be outside of their room. You should have come to speak to us at our room, not be a creep and stand outside their room like a fucking pervert. OP: Sir, they are classified as a threat with the accusations of the destruction of private property. As it stands, the hotel managers have made it clear that you're no longer guests here and you must leave the property immediately. Entitled mother: You have no proof that our children are behind this. They're perfectly behaved and they've been in the rooms all night. Unfortunately, as they kept trying to yell and talk over me, I was beginning to get irritated and was losing my polite attitude and started to become that extreme asshole security guard with the cop attitude that no one wants to deal with. OP: That's bullshit. I've hotel staff that has seen them outside of their room. I've guests in the hotel that have seen them outside of their room, and I've personally seen that they have been outside of their room. Entitled mother: Everyone else is lying and personally targeting our children, including you. There are many children here that could be the culprits behind these accusations, but you're just choosing to blame everything on our children. OP: I don't care if you believe me or not. You need to leave the property immediately. It is this moment that the entitled father got directly in my face and said, I don't have to do anything you say. We're not leaving. I work for the FBI. I looked at him and demanded he showed me his federal credentials, proving that he's part of the FBI. The state that I live and work in states that if you identify as a member of local or federal law enforcement or as a federal employee, you have to show your credentials, even if you live in another state. The entitled father said he didn't have to until I told him this exact same law. He then told me that he left them in the room and needed to get them. When I was able to confirm that they didn't want to leave, I calmly walked back to the hotel lobby, but not before the entitled friend said, Go ahead and leave, you pervert. You know you're wrong and that you have nothing to prove. As soon as I was in the elevator, I got on the radio with another clerk at the front desk and told them to call the local sheriff's department and told her the entire encounter and explained that they were now trespassing on hotel property. While the clerk was on the phone, the night auditor came in and I briefed him on what was going on. The entitled father came down and began demanding the hotel give the family a full refund, or they were not leaving, and they couldn't do anything as he was FBI. He, unfortunately, severely scared the two clerks that were still on shift and made the night auditor nervous with this. And I told them to let law enforcement know that the man was claiming this and that I now feared he had a weapon on the property. Thankfully, they went back to their rooms after realizing that the hotel would not budge, and they stayed in their rooms for the rest of the night. I checked all the hallways just in case, but thankfully they remained clear for the rest of my shift. Law enforcement showed up around 3 in the morning, and when I explained everything to them, they became guarded, especially now that I said I feared the man was FBI and may have had a weapon on the property that was not registered in the hotel database. Law enforcement said that they could take the family away as they were trespassing, but there was little that could be done. The parents told the officers that I had not talked to the parents, nor had the hotel spoken to them about anything. The entitled father and his friend started demanding information from the hotel about the clerks involved and all my work information. I told them I was not allowed to legally give out any of my work information outside of the name of my work. It wasn't true, but the guy believed it and said he would contact my work and make sure my superiors hear about me and how I was a creep. The rest of the night was uneventful, and the entitled family stayed in their rooms. But that was because they didn't want to leave, and the night auditor was a nice guy and didn't want to kick the children out at 4 in the morning with nowhere else to go. Since the kids of these entitled parents were connected to a sports group, and there were about 10 to 15 rooms all connected under the group, the hotel decided to charge each room with the destruction of property and attached a report from both hotel staff and myself to make sure it was known why each room was charged over $500 in damages. One of the fun things about that night is that one of the sheriffs that showed up was a friend from high school that I haven't seen in over 10 years. It's nice to catch up with him and see that he was doing good. It's amazing how you're able to keep your cool and handle the situation. I think that was pretty brave of you. I'm glad you were able to get yourself out of there. Hopefully, things will go better for you from now on. My neighbors cut down our trees to improve their view. So this is not my story, but my parents. However, they don't know the internet, so I will tell this story to them. So I live with my parents as I'm only 14, and my parents decided they wanted a holiday house so they can work on and have to get away from life. When we moved in, we talked to the neighbor. On one side is nice neighbors, a lovely couple who have just moved into their first house, and on the other side are entitled neighbors who rent their house to any people who want to have parties. When we look around the garden, we see 3 very tall trees, healthy trees, which have probably taken about 200 years to grow. And as we are on a dip, these trees block the view of the house on the other side of the dip very well, from seeing into my parents' bedroom and bathroom, which doesn't have curtains on the windows. I think you can see what's about to happen. We have to go back to our other house so my mom can go back to work. When my mom gets a call from the nice neighbors, and this conversation ensued. Hey, you need to come back right now. The entitled neighbors are on your property with chainsaws, and I don't know what they're planning to do. Wait, what? Can you stop them? I'm so sorry, but my ferry's about to leave, and I need to go to work. However, I can call the police if you want. I know all of them very well, so they will come quickly. Yes, please. I will get my dad to get on the next ferry and get there as fast as he can. However, when the police got there, they were gone. I had just gotten out of school and caused my dad need to pick me up. I went with him to see what had happened. When we get there, we see this view. The 3 trees are gone, and what is left are 3 very hacked-at tree stubs and some glass. They had cut down our trees, and in the process smashed part of the glass wall around the deck. Hearing chainsaws, we look over. There's no fence yet. We see 3 mid-30 men cutting wood up probably for firewood. This is when the entitlement really starts. Hey, why'd you cut down our trees? Oh, hey, we were just looking over to your side, noticed that if these trees fell, they could really mess up your house. And being new neighbors, we thought we should do the neighborly thing of cutting them down for you. Sort of new neighbors helping each other out. What? Those trees were really healthy. Also, you trespassed and cut down our tree without our consent. We're calling the police on you. The neighbor got so angry at my dad for saying this. What the heck, dude? We improved your view and made sure the trees wouldn't hit your house. We helped you. Why to call the police? Now, my dad hates being called dude. It's like swearing to him. So him getting angry, also being a lot stronger and bigger than him, so he just walked inside while I stay standing there, not really knowing what to do. Then the oldest, like 40 years old, looks at me and says, "Hey, sweetie, if you stop your dad from calling the police, we'll give you an ice cream." I just turned around and walked inside, as the way he said it was so creepy. Fast forward about a week, and we find out that the trees they cut down actually blocked their view of the sea, and them cutting the trees down helped their rental. They've been fined a lot of money, and have to do some community work as well as pay us enough money to put up a fence so that we don't have to see them anymore. Entitled neighbors have also started to rent us out, so hopefully we don't ever have to see them again. Edit. I just found this out and needed to share it. 1. My mom has added trees, but they will take about 100 years to grow tall. 2. We're figuring out the boundary so that we can plant bushes so the fence is harder to build, though that does unfortunately mean I can't paint it. 3. For everyone saying build a high fence to block their view, the fence would have to be about 5 meters tall, and the build limit is 2.5 meters. 4. Turns out they have a dog. They used to poo on our and a nice neighbor's yard, so nice neighbors are prepared to watch them build this fence while we are not at the house to make sure they don't do anything wrong. I can't believe they would go that far. And to offer an ice cream after they'd done something so horrible? I hope you talked to your neighbors about it. They should have been punished more for this. What a bad neighbor. But at least you found out, now the fence is going up. That's great. Thank you for sharing the story with us. It was very interesting to read. If you like this video, check out this other video where a racist Karen called the cops on a black dad who has a white son. Subscribe or you're definitely the jerk.